Hi, I'm Jennifer Zeman, your host of The Food That Binds, a new podcast on the Eat, Drink, Dine podcast network. Today, I'm joined by my friend, George Banks. George is currently the principal of Revel, a real estate consultancy with locations in Atlanta, Brooklyn, and Los Angeles. He's been involved as both the principal and consultant in the creation and operation of a number of destination retail projects, including the Atlanta Dairies and Krog Street Market, which was the first food hall in the Southeast. George is also an expert on urban development, adaptive reuse, the future of restaurants, and experience-driven design, in addition to being a huge history buff. Hi, George. Thanks for being here.
Wow, thank you for having me, Z.
Can you tell my listeners what it is that you do and how you came here to be?
Quickly, briefly, I am a real estate developer in Atlanta. I was a pretty typical real estate developer until my old colleagues and I at Paces Properties in 2014 decided to build a food hall, which was the first one in Atlanta and the first in the South, frankly. We opened Krog Street Market in 2014, and it was a bit of a hit. The sun and the moon and the stars all aligned for us. And that was the moment that really altered my real estate trajectory to focus more on in-town adaptive reuse, but most importantly on food and beverage, music, entertainment, what in my world they call the experience-driven stuff, as opposed to just the buying of tchotchkes, which is really retail. And then in 2016, because of that experience, started Revel to help other larger institutional guys and girls do this sort of thing, which is how do we make the ground floor of our building really cool and neat and fun? And how do we get the right restaurants and the right coffee shops and bars and music and entertainment, all of which is there to help drive the values of the real estate upstairs and next door.
And a lot of your projects, just from what I've seen, have been about taking existing old structures, like Krog, you said, was actually Tyler Perry's old studio.
There were Medea costumes. I swear to God, there were Medea costumes inside when we bought it. There were movie sets. It was absolutely nuts. Yeah, look, if for the Atlanta listeners, everyone knows Ponce City Market, our sort of food hall competitor up the road. Mm-hmm. For a lot of people in real estate, Ponce City Market was eye-opening because again, you know this, in a world that was not populated by large institutional real estate people and giant big companies, suddenly they took an old building and they put some cool retail in it and some apartments. And next thing you know, the building is being filled up with the biggest names in technology, paying the biggest prices for office space in the city.
But Krog opened before Ponce, no?
Krog opened before Ponce. We opened about 8 months before.
And you were more influenced by Chelsea Market at the time. I helped you, by the way, full disclaimer.
Yeah, so full disclaimer.
I helped
you and I know each other because I cold called you because I liked your old blog and I thought you had a very snarky attitude that was similar to mine, and got your help to help us curate that first Krog. And I'll tell the listeners with Z's help, we put together a draft list of users we wanted. And I bet you we got 80% of it. People will tell you what they love most about Krog is the selection of operators in there is such the greatest hits of Atlanta. And it feels like a great place to go every day of the week.
But now you have the Dairies also happened, which was not, it was like Krog, but different. Can you tell people about that project?
So then we bought the old Atlanta Dairies building on Memorial Drive, which had been vacant for years. Parmalat had actually made milk there maybe 10 years ago. And in that place, it started off, we were going to do sort of a retail version of Krog, which frankly means a flea market, which is a bad idea. So we then decided to kind of turn Krog on its head. Krog was about food. So we said, okay, let's not do food again. Let's make Dairies about music. Okay, fine. That sounds easy enough. And at Krog, we were very intentional. For example, we didn't put outlets in the dining area. If you can't get 4 hours of computer time, you don't need to spend 5 hours at Krog. No offense. I want you to eat and have a good time, but I want to turn people and get a lot of people in the door. So we said, all right, let's take the exact opposite with Dairies. Let's make it where you hang out. Let's encourage people to hang out and not spend money. And I bet if they do, they'll end up spending money because they spent the day. So the centerpiece at Dairies was a big outdoor space. It really, frankly, was trying to be sort of an outdoor Chastain amphitheater. What if we had a Chastain with retail tenants on it? We've got the live music venue. We're hoping to have a second one. We've got Wonder Kid, our diner, open. We knew we wanted to have a diner. If you've been to the Imaginarium, that's fantastic what Three Taverns is doing. And that, again, is meant to be sort of the outdoor front living room for Reynoldstown. Pre-COVID, we didn't know that outdoor was so important. That just kind of lucky happenstance.
Well, speaking of COVID, that's really what I wanted to talk to you about as someone who started food halls. There's vaccines now.
Oh, that's right. I'm getting my second one.
Oh yeah, I already did. I'm very grateful for science. But just in terms of where we were pre-COVID with food halls, I mean, I, as a restaurant person who writes about food, was already kind of getting tired of it, because in Atlanta it happened, and then it almost became like it was just everywhere. And then and it wasn't a matter of quality. It wasn't a matter of experience. It was a matter of who can we get. And then also these brands that I really had loved got so diluted in a way that the quality went down. And I mean, I just did not become, I almost evolved out of being their target.
Yeah.
So like before COVID, what was happening?
Halls in the world.
There are a lot of shitty food halls in the world,
and they're food courts. And the only difference is they've got distressed wood and slightly nicer furniture. Is the only difference.
Exactly. Yeah. And like sparkling water for free in a dispenser.
The guys we sold Krog to had to get rid of the sparkling water for free.
No, that's the best. I love that thing.
I'm telling you, true story. The annual bill on sparkling water and cups was like $100,000.
Oh my gosh.
Totally.
Oh my gosh. Okay, but just before COVID happened, where was the industry going?
Too many food halls, too many places. Look, real estate is notorious for taking a good idea and jumping the shark as quickly as possible, right? The first enclosed mall was an amazing idea. Had we only built 100 enclosed malls in this country, they all would still be unbelievable. The problem is we built 1,200 of them, and 1,100 of them stink. Food hall is the exact same thing. Real estate guys just want to fill space. Suddenly a food hall feels like a space filler. I can't tell you how many people have called and said, well, I'll just lease you 30,000 square feet and you go make your money. It doesn't go like that. And so now we got 1,000 of them, and 90% of them are terrible. And I don't wish any ill on the people that operate inside of them, but they're going to go out of business because they were poorly constructed, poorly thought out, hastily organized, bad locations. But what comes out of food halls now with COVID is it ghost kitchens, maybe. Other ways of dining in public, maybe, are we all going to eat out of our house? Lord, I hope not. I mean, you don't go out to eat, do you? You order in.
I mean, I order in. I get
left your house
takeout.
in 18 months.
So not true. I go into a restaurant and I'll get takeout. Now that I'm vaccinated, I feel comfortable doing that. But you still here in Georgia,
you walk on a selfie stick and just.
I should, because I walked into a place the other day to grab a burger, and I was like just 30 minutes north of Georgia, and nobody had a mask on.
Well, nobody has COVID outside the perimeter.
No, they don't. They don't. So I mean, like I still go in because I'm masked up, and I do that. I got a reservation for this weekend, so we're going to go out and sit at Redbird because I really trust Zeb Stevenson.
I do too.
And so we're going to go there. He's got a heated patio. Okay. I'm more comfortable doing that. I mean, in general, I don't like people.
Well, I knew this.
Yeah. So
eating at home was your jam.
It was great. It was an excuse to stay home after having eaten out at restaurants for a long, long time. Right. Where was the rest of the world when this was happening in terms of food halls? Were people still using Krog? Did they close down?
In February of 2020, in February 2020, food halls by and large were still going strong, most of them. But to make the analogy with malls, a good mall was doing very well in 2020, and bad malls were doing terrible. We were starting to get calls in 2019 from owners of real estate with food halls asking us to help them fix bad food halls. Those calls were starting in 2019. I've got a food hall, the guy can't pay the rent, it's no good, we got to re-envision it, what can we do? So we were already seeing too many. Put aside COVID, imagine a COVID-less world in Atlanta. You would have seen probably a dozen food halls built in the metropolitan area over, from 2015 to 2022. And 8 of them would have ended up closing eventually. You've been left with Krog Pots and maybe one more. That feels like it's still the case. I think COVID has dramatically changed extroverted introverts like you dining out. That is something that people have to deal with in restaurateurs, and just how do you organize a kitchen for delivery and dine in is a challenging logistical issue that restaurateurs are trying to deal with. But look, I'll tell you this, every suburban restaurateur I know in every market we're in will tell you that 2020 was the best year they had, period, bar none, record-setting profits.
That's so strange to me.
Record-setting profits.
How is that possible? But not ITP, not inside the perimeter for those listening outside of Atlanta.
For those outside of Atlanta, the in-town restaurateurs some did all right and some did pretty well, but a lot of them struggled. And
I read that there were 70,000 restaurants that had closed in the United States.
So a year ago, people were talking that 300,000 would close.
Mm-hmm. So you think it's actually been less damaging?
I think it's been much less damaging than we thought it was. I suspect the pain has been uneven, right? New York City probably lost more per capita than Columbus, Ohio did.
Well, they have more restaurants.
Well, they have more restaurants, but I think they probably lost more as a percent than other places. Unfortunately, the political aspect of the pandemic played out. Suburban restaurateurs and suburban employees and suburban patrons were much more willing to go out and go to a restaurant. I would categorize you in the sort of in-town set who was hesitant to go out, hesitant to go to the restaurants. Frankly, in a lot of in-town markets, restaurateurs are pressuring each other to stay closed, which I thought was odd.
Here that was happening. And there was also like I felt, and I could be getting this wrong, but I felt like there was an overwhelming sentiment as well that by dining out, you were endangering restaurant workers as well, because they have been, from what I'm reading, like really affected by this. And you see how many, the Giving Kitchen, which is an organization here that helps hospitality workers with medical needs, they had so many grants that they gave for people working in the industry that received COVID because they don't have health insurance.
Yeah, which is ironic because number one criticisms of restaurateurs has been their treatment of employees.
And that's another thing. That's what I was interviewed by Eater Atlanta as kind of, what I thought COVID was doing. And for me, I said that it was like a Control-Alt-Delete for restaurants. You know, and the fact that not only were restaurants going to have to change how they interacted with customers, but the owners of those restaurants were going to have to change how they treated their employees.
That's exactly.
I wonder now, we still haven't really talked about how the owners are operating right now. I just wonder now if that's changing, because I feel like a lot of the ownership was on us as the diners to take care of the employees and not the owners.
And don't you remember when Danny Meyer went to the one wage, there was a great deal of pushback. Some employees, but mostly customers, there's a great deal of pushback.
Well, he reversed that though. It didn't.
We had to undo it because it didn't take.
No, it didn't
customers
take.
were saying we don't get this, which is so dumb because the price of the meal is the same price of the meal. Whether we talk about illiteracy, people are innumerate. People do not understand math. It fell upon customers, or don't forget the best boogeyman was always the landlord. It's always the landlord's fault. If the restaurateur succeeds, it's in spite of the landlord, and if they fail, it's because of them. And the rent's too high, and so I got to charge more for the food, and I can't pay more for the employees. And I'm generalizing, but nevertheless, I would have told you the two biggest problems pre-pandemic were the landlord-tenant relationship and the restaurateur-employee relationship.
And what do you think is going to happen now post-COVID?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. We are going to try, and I don't know if you know Elizabeth Feichter and Kelly Campbell over at Southern Culinary Collective. They do a bunch of food events in town in Atlanta, Food and Wine. We are starting, and we'll have more press about it this year, we are starting a restaurant management company where we will manage restaurants on behalf of landlords. So that we think takes out one stress point. So it's not tenant having to pay money to landlord for rent. It is operator, us, running restaurant on landlord's behalf. Landlord profits or doesn't profit based on how the restaurant. The second part of that we think is the other trick is we are going to make the company employee owned by the restaurant staff we hire. So suddenly now the restaurateur is the employee because it's an ESOP, and that entity is managing restaurants on behalf of building owners. We've got one we're going to start this year. We hope to have more. We think it gets rid of two of the stress points. Perhaps it doesn't.
But you think that people are ready to come back to food halls as well? You think that this is people are using them?
You're going to go out to dinner. You're going to be going out to dinner before you know it inside restaurants.
It's so crazy. Until my kid is vaccinated, I can't imagine. But you think people are coming out? You think food halls are going to survive?
You don't think people will go out to dinner?
I do. I just think that it's just changed for me. Like the thought of somebody I was already a germaphobe before COVID, because
You
I've
were
been
right
burned
the
a
whole
lot in
time.
restaurants.
We weren't listening to you.
Listen, I've been burned in restaurants a lot, and I have the constitution of an ox, but I've been burned so many times that I became a total germaphobe. And the thought of somebody bringing me my fork, touching my
That's
glass.
not normal. That's not normal.
Well, I'm not normal. I'm exceptional. Hello.
Well, clearly.
That's why we're friends.
The rest of us unwashed masses deal with the germ.
But no, I mean, I will get back there, but I just feel like it will be forever changed. I don't think, like I was telling you, Dan Barber said in an interview, kind of to paraphrase here, that he thought that the notion that we'd be getting back to quote unquote normal was preposterous because we're facing a recession. I mean, that's another huge consideration. I mean, people are hurting, owners are hurting. I mean, who has money to open a restaurant right now? It's without a huge backer, that is. The independent operators. Who has that?
Tell you how many restaurants we are talking to about opening new spaces, reopening old spaces. In the real estate world, retail leasing activity, which is a lot of restaurants, is brisk. People are doing deals. People are out there. I don't know why there's not a bigger recession out there. You fire everybody for a year and you send them home. But I mean, look, the stock market's at an all-time high. I will tell you, a lot in my world thought there would be a lot of discounted real estate to buy, and it hasn't happened yet. Things that are selling for big numbers. I think there's more distress to come in real estate. You know, the government throwing trillions of dollars at everybody to stay home doesn't hurt. Everybody's rich from money from the government. I don't see it. I mean, I really don't see the slowdown in dining spend as a total dollar. I think the more critical component for the restaurant industry is where and how that dollar is spent. And I think technology and COVID has pushed a great deal of that to delivery home/to go and not in person. And I think that stays. And I think that's a more difficult thing for the industry.
So you do think it stays, the pivot to curbside and online ordering?
Without question.
Or these restaurants, like you mentioned, ghost kitchens, operating as a ghost kitchen essentially, and the, rise of ghost kitchens. You mentioned earlier that you think that there is some sort of line with food halls to ghost kitchens?
Well, I mean, if you think about a ghost kitchen is just a food hall you don't let anybody come into.
But I mean, a ghost kitchen would.
Yes. And so for the listeners, I was about to say the readers, for the listeners out there, a ghost kitchen is a facility with a collection of tiny kitchens that allow brands to prepare food that is then delivered to you via DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, what have you. The idea being that, look, the internet has finally come to food. I can get on my app. I can order my Shake Shack burger and it gets brought to me. Chances are that Shake Shack burger didn't get made in Shake Shack. It got made in a kitchen that Shake Shack leases inside a small warehouse somewhere.
Is that real?
Absolutely.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. The Shake Shack burger did not come from Shake Shack. It came from Shake Shack, from a kitchen they run in a warehouse.
From their commercial kitchen.
Of their commercial kitchen somewhere.
Wow, I did not know that.
Chili's has, on the reverse of that, Chili's has virtual brands that you can only find online. Just Wings, It's Wings, you're a wing person, try it.
Mm-hmm.
That does come out of the Chili's kitchen, but you wouldn't know that it's a Chili's brand. You just get your app. The app and the algorithms say the best wings in your neighborhood are Just Wings. You order them. They show up at your door. You have no idea where they came from. They came out of a Chili's kitchen, but they're not affiliated.
So then what's the benefit of brands of just like small operators opening a restaurant where they have to deal with the public if they can eliminate all of that overhead and interaction moving forward? Like why would food halls continue as they have?
I think you're going to see a shakeout. I don't think the mall is dead because I think there are some great malls and great locations with great traffic. And I don't think the food hall is dead. In 10 years, will there still be Ponce and Krog? I think there will, because I think people inherently want a social, engaging time out with friends and strangers and be out and about. I mean, look at the 1918 flu didn't shut us down forever. The 20s roared. So I don't see that stopping. I do begin to wonder, though, if there isn't a slight move away from. So food halls took advantage of a trend towards what we called street food, right? A little more casual, a little more global, a little more low price, no service, right? Counter service, order and go away. That was a trend in food that food halls took advantage of. I don't wonder if from this we're not going to see a small trend back towards fine dining, in-room dining at a nicer experience. Some people may say, and you're probably one of them, actually, you just admitted to this, I'm going to go out less, but when I do, it's going to be really nice. It's going to be Redbird. It's going to be Bacchanalia. It's going to be something.
No, it doesn't have to be nice. It just has to be like a chef or a restaurant that I trust, right?
Yeah.
And that can be anyone. I have a lot of restaurants that I trust, taco place, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's a lot more thought in the process. But I think that's my personal opinion on where we'll be, is that we will eventually return back, but we're going to be like, who's doing it right? Who's being responsible? Who do we trust that they're not going to like turn and burn and not care about the food?
I think you care more about that than most consumers.
I do. I mean,
we know you're exceptional. We've established it.
I know, but I'm also obsessed with food. But I also don't think that most consumers worked in restaurants like I have. So I think, or studied them as much as I have. So I don't think that they really understand like how dirty they can be in general. I mean, because listen, a lot of people, we're still all worried about COVID, but all of this, like, I don't want to get sick from a restaurant because somebody didn't wash their hands when they made my burger anymore.
But you love Buford Highway as much as anybody, but so
I love everything. I love Buford Highway.
Holes in the wall, and
But most of those people take good care. I mean, like it's interesting. The places I get sick from are not Buford Highway holes in the wall. It's in Buckhead. It's everybody's favorite Persian spot in Sandy Springs. Did you read 10 Restaurants That Changed the World? Did you read that book? No, I did not.
You should read the book. It was interesting. One note he makes is the reason Howard Johnson's as a restaurant became so popular is because so many restaurants were so badly run and so of ill repute. This is 100 years ago.
Yeah.
That standardization became the symbol of quality that you could trust.
McDonald's used to be the same.
McDonald's used to be the same thing. The old line for Holiday Inn was, the best surprise is no surprise.
And for our listeners, George is also a total history nerd, which is fascinating. So we should just let him go.
We should but I didn't answer your question. So I don't know why the small restaurateur has a real problem tomorrow, in the future, because of the cost of customer acquisition. How do you get a customer? And let's be clear, the ghost kitchens aren't necessarily profitable. DoorDash still charges you 30% or whatever, just eye-watering high number that is. So it's not like you're making a ton of money in the ghost kitchen unless you're doing insane volume. And then, by the way, I would tell you that most customers, I don't think, are as discerning as you are. And I believe most people will simply say, look, it's Friday night. I want wings. I'm going to get on DoorDash, Grubhub. I'm going to look for wings in my neighborhood and I'm going to get them. And I don't really necessarily care who they come from. That should skeeve you out. That should skeeve the hell out of you that wings show up at your door. You don't know who made them, where they came from.
I mean, I worry about ghost kitchens in terms of a quality control standpoint. I have not really ordered from any, but I mean, there's ghost kitchens
you probably have. You don't know it. You ordered Shake Shack. You didn't know it came from a ghost kitchen.
I don't order Shake Shack. Burgers don't travel. But no, I just wonder, there are true ghost kitchens like this guy, Pad Thai guy on Sandy Springs. He does all Pad Thai and delivers through one of the services. But then there are these restaurants that have remained closed and been operating. So I'm wondering, do you think some of those restaurants will stay with that model? Or do you think people that pivoted will stay?
Chick-fil-A already has a new prototype. I don't think they've seen it yet. And the new Chick-fil-A prototype is heavy drive-through, heavy curbside.
They do a great job, I got to say.
They do a great job. I am become addicted to the Chick-fil-A app. And it is ready in no time. And the new prototype is heavy drive-through, heavy curbside, and limited to no in-room dining.
But I think people will want in-room dining.
I do too. I mean, no offense to Chick-fil-A, in-room at Chick-fil-a is not the world's greatest experience. It's nice
for kids. But I mean, listen.
Oh my God, the playground at a fast food restaurant has got to be the germiest place.
Yet I will eat on the street in Mexico City.
Yet you will eat in the street in Mexico City. Mm-hmm. Maybe the carpet in Hartsfield Airport is germier, but that's a close.
I was supposed to go to Soft Media opening last week for Andrew Zimmern's new food hall, Chattahoochee Food Works, which is 22,000 square feet. One of the things he said when people were asking, are food halls really a thing that people are doing? His take
Yes.
was that he said that the events of the last 6 months have underscored the necessity to provide low barrier entry to business for food entrepreneurs. Do you think that is an accurate statement?
I do think that's an accurate statement.
With food halls post-COVID.
Do food halls do it? Maybe. I mean, maybe not.
Well, I mean, he was talking about in relation to food halls and his food hall opening. Do you think that this is a low barrier entry for people?
Well, yes, it is. I don't know the economics of the Chattahoochee Food Hall.
Right. I'm just saying food halls as a concept.
But in a concept, yes, as a concept, a food hall is a great way to do that. I'll tell you, though, I have found that a lot of new brands struggle in food halls because of a few reasons. Because the rents are high if you don't have high volume. If you're doing crazy volume, you make a lot of money in food hall. But it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Customer acquisition cost is a real thing. If you're, what restaurant would you open? Siemens
Tacos. I would open a taco stand.
Okay, Siemens Tacos, Z Tacos. You have a brand. You have an incredible leg up on people because you have a name in this town that has with it some cachet and some notoriety and some knowledge. So, when somebody else goes to open tacos, they've got a real fight in front of them. How do I get people to know my taco brand? That is not always an easy thing in a food hall, because if you're sitting next to, if Shake Shack is next to you in the food hall and somebody else is who's well known, the consumer is going to go to the brands they know. And so it's not a sure thing. I definitely agree with Andrew's comment that it's a low price alternative. It beats the hell out of a food truck, and it's a whole lot less expensive than a real restaurant. A food hall doesn't have the 30% service charge that you get with a ghost kitchen that's killing you on delivery. A food hall is as reasonable an opening salvo for an operator as there exists in this world. Unfortunately, I think the move to delivery and at-home dining is tilting the table in favor of the big brands with money, period.
Yeah, it's just crazy because for the longest time, I didn't feel like you could get good food delivered in Atlanta. And it wasn't until, or groceries delivered. Right. And then there was Instacart and DoorDash and Uber Eats and Postmates. I remember seeing someone at Postmates at a building be like, hey, what are you? What are you doing? Yeah. Like, they told me what they did. And I was like, oh, finally. And I just wonder if people can really go back. I really do. I'm very interested to see how the consumer interacts with restaurants, or the diner rather, to not sound so like corporate speak, interacts with restaurants post-COVID, because it's definitely a spectrum. There's definitely people that need to get out. I have a friend who just needs to go eat on patios. I mean, she loves it. She wants to go out and eat. My parents, listen, they're in New York. They're going and sitting inside of Minetta Tavern, and
yeah, the JG Mill, and I don't care what the COVID says. I'm getting my hamburger. Yeah,
but I mean, because they're choosing specific restaurants that are doing it well. They're at Minetta. They have plastic dividers, and people are separated. And parents are vaccinated.
They won't care. In a year, your parents won't care. No one will care.
You really believe that?
I fundamentally, wholeheartedly believe that no one will care, because what? We are not shocked from 100 years ago at the Spanish flu that killed millions upon millions of people. We got past that. We have short-term memories. Even if COVID continues to make the rounds, flu makes the rounds, we still went out. We'll probably wash our hands more, but they're not going to be plastic dividers between tables for the rest of the time. That is completely absurd, in my opinion.
So you think that we have gotten to kind of like the most severe that things are going to be in terms of sanitary restrictions, and soon we're just going to all go back to the way things were?
No, I don't think it's the way things were. I think the sanitary. Well, look, oh my God, you go to South Beach right now. There's no sanitary concerns.
Did you see that article that Adam Platt wrote about how if you want to see what the future of New York restaurants look like, look at Miami. South Beach right now.
They're all down there. The weather's better, and it's less union. I fundamentally believe there's no way that the health considerations continue. It's just not going to happen. We're not going to have half open restaurants. We're not going to have outdoor dining only. Now, I think consumers are going to make choices about where they take their meals based on convenience and technology. I think weekday lunch was already a dying animal. Dine out weekday lunch. That was already dying before COVID.
Why?
Because people would eat from their desk, because we were being forced to, because the hour lunch break was no longer a thing, because I'm bringing lunch with me from home, whatever it is. So that is probably where a lot of lost money gets converted into delivery. I think a lot of Friday night dinners that might have gone out and get converted to delivery because I don't feel like going back out on Friday and I just want something I know I can get really quality delivery here. So I think that changes. So I'm not sure the overall restaurant dollar gets spent changes. I think how and where it gets spent is to be determined. But I promise you, if you go to name your favorite New York restaurant, if you go in a year from now, there will not be plastic dividers everywhere. Nobody wants that.
No, I mean, it's if you're going out, it's for a certain experience to be taken care of.
Yes.
Instead of doing it yourself.
Yes.
And I think a lot of us want to be taken care of. I just hope there's a way to be taken care of. I mean, I don't know. I hate using the word the new normal. I hate going and saying going back the way things were.
The old normal. That's the old normal. Now we're in the normal.
We're in the normal.
Yeah,
okay. Well, in the normal, I'm just really curious as a restaurant person, because a lot of the people that are my colleagues feel the same way about going out to restaurants right now.
Right now, I get it, but there's no. Do you think that a year from now, you think your colleagues will still not be going into restaurants? You think it'll just be dine in, carry out, eat on the patio?
Yeah, but I don't think. But I just my intuition says it's still not going to look the same, and I just wonder what it's going to look like. My relationship with food is changing very much, which is why I started this podcast. A lot of things around food that I wanted to explore, and this is just something I'm just very curious. We couldn't touch another person for a year. And if the business is hospitality,
which involves
touching or contact, there's contact. How do you, I guess we evolved past that, but we never let our guard down. Maybe standards are more stringent on sanitation, like you said. Maybe these pivots with curbside and more takeout, more delivery stay.
I think they stay not because of health concerns. I think they stay because they appeal to, at times, people's want for convenience.
Well, I mean, COVID, it was a Control-Alt-Delete, but it also fast-forwarded a lot of timelines.
Yes.
Right? I mean, you've seen a lot of restaurants in Atlanta, or chefs rather in Atlanta, finally going out and hanging their own shingle after years of working for executive chefs. But it should be interesting. It should be interesting to see what happens. But you think that people are going to continue to spend and that there's nothing going to happen, like we're not going to have a huge recession.
I don't know about that. I'm not the economist. If you go back and look at the restaurant spend over the last year, it was almost not down at all from what it was the year before. It just got distributed differently.
I see.
And again, I think the suburban restaurants who make up the majority of the restaurants in the country, we all want to talk about, Minetta Tavern in New York City, but that's not the restaurant experience for most human beings, right? Mm-hmm. Most of our restaurant experience is Chipotle. I mean, let's be honest. Mm-hmm. Or the whatever full service restaurant is in, nearest your cul-de-sac. And those guys all had bang up years. And work from home is impacting a lot of this. Work from home now changes the math about where you take your meals. And suddenly the in-town locations may not fare as well when people are working from home and home is not in town.
Interesting.
You, to me, in an earlier conversation, said you think that the diner-restaurateur relationship has changed. And now maybe the diner is no longer in charge. Is that a fair assessment? Before it was the diner's always right, and maybe now the diner's wrong.
I feel like before COVID, it was restaurants, in my experience, nationwide, internationally, whatever, were very much in control of how you interacted with them. Okay. And I talk about this a lot with my dad because we're both food nerds. And it's like you would show up for your reservation at 7:00 and you'd be there on time and they'd be like, sorry, your table's not ready yet. And you still had to wait for 30 minutes, even though you had that contract that I made this reservation and I'm here.
I tell my daughters that Seinfeld covered everything. But keep going.
It's very Seinfeld.
Everything has been covered by Seinfeld. There's nothing else to be discussed.
But, you got there and there was like the exchange, like with George and the doctor, right? And she went skiing. But this is changing to me because now I feel like they were coming to us for help to stay afloat, us as diners.
That's right.
And then also changing a lot to cater to us diners when before with someone who eats in a restaurant all the time, a lot of this, they're like, you're just lucky to be here. It's like very country club. Like, you're just lucky you got in the door, follow our rules. And if you don't like it, go somewhere else. And I feel like now there's been a power shift for good or bad. I mean, it has had a power shift, and I wonder if that power will shift back.
You are dining at fancier restaurants, and clearly you're going to.
No. Okay, it is kind of fancier because it's sushi, and sushi is never cheap unless you're eating bad sushi. And or like the little
conveyor belt sushi does conveyor belt sushi survive the pandemic?
I bet you it does.
I bet it does too. That's not good sushi, but it's a great time.
No, my God, kids love it. Yeah, it's like a game.
I love it.
But like, for instance, here's an example. So there's like this super fancy sushi restaurant on Beaufort Highway that everyone goes to. Everyone considers it top sushi restaurant in Atlanta. And before COVID, there was literally a sign put on the door that said, if you had your perfume or your cologne was too strong,
you got to get out.
That you were going to have to get out, and they would gladly book your reservation. So I'm talking about those types of things. Like,
how many places? There are like 600,000 restaurants in the country. There are 20 of them that do that.
Right. Or like, let's talk about like lottery systems for reservations.
Chipotle never kicked me out for having on too much perfume.
But I'm saying, we're talking about restaurants.
I was wearing too much. Was Chipotle not a restaurant? Was it top hand?
I mean, that's fast casual. We're talking about a sit-down restaurant, or like the whole talk system with getting reservations and the lottery. And remember how hard it was, and just. Or like Rayo's, for instance, in New York, you could not get
Staple House. You had to get on the computer at 12 o'clock, and 12:05. By 12:05, you were getting a 2-top at 5:15 on a Tuesday.
But now, listen, Rayo's in New York has been one of the hardest reservations to get in New York for decades. And then COVID happens, and you can get it delivered.
Yeah, I still get the jar sauce in my house.
I do too. It's the best jarred sauce. Although Carbone has one coming out, and I'm very interested to see how it is. But that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, like these restaurants that were hard to get into.
Well, David Chang talks about this. We've got to get. It's all in the merch. We got to get out at people in the restaurant. We got to start selling our stuff to them. We have to diversify our lines of business. I hear you that there are restaurants like that. My perception of sit-down full-service restaurants was that, by and large, across the country, across the spectrum, that type of, hey, get out of here without a tie on, is a very small slice of full-service restaurants.
Right, but I don't feel like that small slice can do that anymore.
Oh, I completely agree.
I don't think that the lottery system for reservations is happening.
Except Balthazar will still be able to turn away the bridge and tunnel crowd whenever they choose to.
They just reopened.
I know, and they're going to line up, and they're still going to be able to tell you it's an hour wait, and people will gladly say, okay.
So you think that's still going to happen? That's not going to change.
At the touristy joints like Balthazar that everyone goes and says, 5 restaurants I got to eat at, this is one of them, and I got to go. Plus, it's a nice restaurant.
So who do you think has the power in the relationship between diner and restaurateur today?
I think algorithms. I think internet does.
Really?
I think you and I are different. I think most people are picking restaurants based on what someone online has told them. A review, a Facebook post, a Yelp, whatever you call it. And I think this is the problem with ghost kitchens, to go back. I think that the Chili's of the world and the Shake Shacks of the world can pay all the money to have the algorithms direct you, the diner, to their takeaway product. The small chef doesn't have that ability necessarily. It's a harder hill to climb. I think the major problem that small restaurateurs have, and I mean, look, the New York guys are not small, but your small average restaurateur now
has to... Like who in Atlanta?
Any new restaurateur.
New.
Anybody, Jarrett Stieber, who's just reopening Little Bear after you.
Who's great.
Who's great. He has a huge hill to climb in front of him of how does he get people to know he's there? How does he get people to come to his restaurant when there's now infinite opportunities delivered by delivery?
Social.
I mean, sure, there's always social media. There is always word of mouth, which is what you really want as a restaurateur. There's always the neighborhood goes there, people went, et cetera, down the road. But he's having to compete with larger restaurateurs and big chains that have lots of money to drive Facebook ads, to drive reviews, to do Instagram advertising. It's really hard, I think, to stand out for small restaurateurs in a world full of data. That's, I think, the problem.
That's really interesting.
And it doesn't matter how good his food is, because it's amazing. If they don't come in the door, he's never going to.
You can't convert him if you don't get him in the door.
You can't convert him, you can't get in the door. And I love, there are a lot of great chefs out there who do make amazing food, but unfortunately, a lot of them, this, my biggest pre-COVID complaint was that most great chefs Their job was over as soon as the food hit the expo line. There was no, I don't care about the dining room. I don't care about the service. I don't care about how it's treated out there. I hit this great plate of food. You're welcome. To the point that I'm selling you a $30 item of food that cost me $40. That's bad business, but it's art. So here's this art for those guys and people who are artistically inclined as chefs, to get them to put on their business person algorithm hat, I think is going to be difficult.
Well, it should be very interesting to watch. I mean, I'm going back out this weekend.
Is there a takeout review job now in the world of periodicals and magazines?
I mean, Wendell Brock over at the AJC, who does a great job. I mean, he's really been consistent with that throughout the whole pandemic. You know, I haven't been doing review. It's hard to review someone's food. It feels it's
because
just
it's takeout?
Because like I do think a lot of food needs to be plated correctly to be understood. It's a creative process. So, I mean, I think if we're talking about sit-down restaurants, the way that, say, for instance, Zeb Stevenson plates a salad is not only going to be artistic, but it may kind of be instructional on how to eat it. In terms of sequence and whatnot. I mean, to get super high level food nerd. But
a super high level food nerd, and it's got to be 1% of restaurants in the country.
And then also there's dishes like, okay, let's talk about like Sichuan restaurants. I mean, Sichuan is probably one of my top 3 favorite things to eat. And there's this thing in Sichuan cooking called wok hei. And it's the fire, the breath of the wok. And you lose that after it sits in styrofoam and comes home, and then you can finally sit down and properly eat it. Even eating it immediately in your car, there's something in terms of, we're talking about just to review. Now, I love takeout food. I'm a big, I do takeout.
But if the restaurateur is selling you food to go, then the restaurateur needs to be willing to be judged on the quality of the food to go when it arrived at your house. Even if it took an hour and sat at an Uber Eats car driver's underneath a pizza, that's part of the challenge. And if the restaurateur isn't willing to deliver you that food, if they're willing to deliver, they have to be willing to be reviewed on it. It's because it's a review. You took the food in the way that it was intended to be eaten, in this case, delivered.
What's really interesting is that when I used to review restaurants back for Creative Loafing,
I love him.
And I would always, he's great. He's a good guy. I follow him on Facebook. He's still writing.
I would literally pick up the Creative Loafing on Wednesday at whatever restaurant it was in the 90s, just to read his grazing.
It was the best. I remember when I first started food writing, I reached out to him to see if he could help me.
Waitron of the week.
Waitron. Oh my God.
That was predating all of the genderization.
But back at Creative Loafing, and this was during Besha Rodell's days as the lead critic, we used to discuss all the time, why aren't we reviewing international restaurants I don't want to say ethnic, but international restaurants like Sichuan, the same that we're reviewing Bacchanalia. And what's interesting now,
number of times or in the same method?
In the same way, like it was very rare across all publications that you saw like a 4-star review for, say, Tasty China. When that happened, that was a big deal. That was really post Ruth Reichel, because she was one of the first in the New York Times to start really reviewing like Sichuan restaurants and stuff like that. But I mean, we would, because this would be, I guess, the justification that I would understand, that because there's so many different aspects to the experience, including service, the atmosphere, all that stuff. If we're all eating out of a takeout box, it levels the playing field in a very interesting way.
It absolutely does. And now look, there are a lot of chefs and restaurateurs who are doing creative things with takeout, good looking packaging, purposeful packaging.
Mujo Sushi out of the Casalucci's. I mean, it's beautiful.
What's their bucket in Chicago is doing,
Alinea.
Alinea is doing molecular gastronomy. They got to line out the door.
Oh, what was it? Masa in New York had like a $400 sushi kit or something like that you could take home to do,
Of course, you got to impress. But I think if you are the restaurateur who is selling the food to go, then you are liable to have it reviewed in the way that it fits. And so maybe the trade-off is you, the reviewer, have to do 3 or 4 to-go meals of the same thing.
Well, I mean, we do that anyway, right?
You do that anyway. You're going to go 3 times to the new restaurant in incognito to review it. So review it 3 times, and if it gets delivered poorly, then you've done your job, because the consumer has a right to know that when you get XYZ from this restaurant, it kind of sucks to go.
What's interesting is when I did used to review restaurants, I would always, one of my reviews, like an extra one, I would get food to go. because
Okay.
I thought it was just an interesting thing.
Sure.
It was like in addition to the ones that I was
Would you
required.
include that in your reviews? Like, by the way, I got the chocolate cake to go and it was amazing.
No. Mm-mm.
You wouldn't.
No. Mm-mm. But it was
just
based on
background for you.
in if I wanted like a fourth visit,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't want to go sit because after like 2 or 3, they're like, all right, the jig is up. We know why you're
They
here.
know who
You
you're
know,
here.
yeah. Then I would get more. I get
Were you
something
really
to go.
doing this just to bilk your employer out of another free meal? Was that really what that
I
was?
mean, like you're assuming that the amount that I didn't have to supplement my eating at every single job, which I have.
The $500 prix fixe was not
At least I can-
easily expensed. Back to Creative Loafing Corporate.
But I do think that would be interesting. But I think there would have to be some sort of mutual agreement between the restaurateur and the reviewer that this was acceptable, because I know I would take. It would make me uncomfortable if somebody just wanted to review me out of all my food in a box as a chef. I mean, I can imagine that would be very stressful.
I bet it would be, but that's the reality of dining. Increasingly, food is going to come to you in a box. It's just the way it's going. That is as inexorable as getting your books sent to you by Amazon.
But how is that so if you're saying we're going to go back to eating in restaurants?
I think we are, but I suspect over time the pie chart, whatever you want to call it, the share of dining that is in your house is going nowhere but up. And so food halls, to go back to food halls, have to be able to provide a really fun environment that makes you want to get out and do all those things. I think good ones can. I think great sit-down restaurants too, right? I mean, we've got the neighborhood French Bistro in Buckhead. It was the place that my wife and I, the first place we came after a week in Mexico at our wedding.
For Anise?
For Anise. Just go sit at the bar, have a glass of wine. You can order off the menu. You know people. It's super easy. It's everything you want in a neighborhood joint that's comfortable and good service. And we had a brunch there on the patio the other day for one of my daughter's birthdays, and it was great to get out. It was outdoors, covered up. Those kind of places, I think, will continue to serve that need of I want to get out. Can I get Anise mussels delivered to my house? Probably. Are they going to be fine? I bet they're going to be fine. But would I rather go to the restaurant and have somebody wait on me and give me a bottle of wine?
So it's going to be experience driven. If people are going out of the house, it's going to be.
I think that's right.
They're going to be more selective, and it's going to be somewhere that can provide an experience that multiple people are comfortable in.
Yes, and again, because I think Friday night dinner now with family and kids, you might have said, "All right, let's get in the car and go get pizza." Now you may say, "Just forget it. I can get the pizza delivered. I can even get the booze delivered if I don't have it."
Getting booze delivered now is huge.
Game changer.
Game changer.
And yeah, game changer. And restaurants better embrace that, because otherwise they're really going to lose out, because now they're going to be delivering food and no booze. And that's a hard business if I'm not getting the booze profit.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people like Mercedes O'Brien, who was like Kevin Gillespie's like go-to cocktail gal. I mean, she's so good. She's been doing cocktail kits. That's like another person that I've seen like kind of the pandemic has pushed her.
Canned cocktails have exploded before now because of it. Oh my gosh.
I saw Tip Top is now going to be in Delta.
Of course they're going to be in Delta. Well, I can't believe they weren't on it before.
So
why
brilliant.
is Delta giving me a little gin and a tonic? Just give me the tonic.
Yeah, and a glass of ice.
Yeah.
Well,
give me 4 cans of gin and tonic while you're at it, because you're here.
I think it's going to be very interesting to watch what happens in the next year in Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta is kind of an exception in terms that people have continued to party, continued to go out regardless. So
I will tell you, the woman who works with me in Los Angeles, among her other duties, she's oversees marketing and operations at Grand Central Market in downtown LA, right? Grand Eddy Food Hall, 60,000 feet, 50 vendors. The first weekend they were reopened this last summer, June, July, after all the LA shutdowns, they had 25,000 people come on Saturday and 25,000 people come on Sunday.
Bananas.
Oh my God, 50,000 people in June 2020. People, I mean, we were shut in, we were cooped up. You're going to see, I think it'll settle down, but you're going to see people wanting to get out. Every time I look, the restaurants I've been to recently have been full.
I mean, there are reservations like I cannot get. Like I've been wanting to go to the Chastain to check it out, and I'm not the kind of person that's going to call and say, "Hey, I'm this person," and I want to.
Yes, I
have a reservation for like 5:30 next Wednesday.
Totally. On a Tuesday, you might get a 5:50. I drive by the Chastain 4 times a week because my daughters play softball at the park next door. For everybody who doesn't know, The Chastain was an old restaurant that closed and reopened in the middle of COVID in a residential neighborhood, odd duck location across the street from a
Where
public
there's no
park,
other restaurant.
where there's no other restaurant within
Total
a
captive
mile and a
audience.
house in a single family neighborhood. Zeman, I'm telling you, there is a line for coffee at 10 in the morning.
Yep.
There is a line out the door for dinner. The patio is full. I now have to actually negotiate, true story, drunk people walking into the road at 8 o'clock at night on a Wednesday, not looking for traffic because they're blowing it.
Problem at the amphitheater?
Oh my God. Can you imagine? So everyone else is listening. There's the amphitheater next door. When the amphitheater is going, oh my God, somebody's going to get killed walking across the street drunk.
Yeah, and they're going to be rich at the restaurant. Well, George, I certainly appreciate you joining me. I always enjoy talking to you, but especially about this kind of stuff because you have so much expertise. It's true.
I take it well. Well, thank you for having me. This was fun. We'll do it anytime. We'll talk about anything you want to talk about.
Is there anything you want to tell listeners or how they can keep up with your work or what they should look out for? Anything you want to plug?
Anything I want to plug? Well, the website is revel.company. We write occasional notes on newsletters on what's going on in the world. You can sign up.
I subscribe. It's very good.
Thank you. Being snarky is fun. We've got some new projects in other cities, so we'll know more about this restaurant company that we're starting. Hopefully it takes off like we hope it will. And that's it. This was enjoyable. I can't wait to hear all the other ones you're doing.
Well, that wraps up this episode of The Food That Binds. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to George Banks for joining us. If you want to keep up with everything he's doing, catch him on revel.company. If you want to keep up with me on social, you can find me at Jennifer Zeman on Instagram and Twitter. We're back for another episode on Wednesday with food writer, podcast host, and best-selling cookbook author Julia Turshen. Julia is the author of Now and Again, Be the Resistance, and Small Victories. She also hosts the podcast called Keep Calm and Cook On. She has a new cookbook out called Simply Julia, which features 110 easy recipes for healthy comfort food, along with some incredibly thought-provoking essays on her relationship with food and more. Again, we're back on Wednesday. Until then, I'm Jennifer Zeman, and you've been listening to The Food That Binds on the Eat, Drink, Dine podcast network.